Stolen breakthrough. Imagine a world without the agonizing specter of chemotherapy. A world where a cancer diagnosis wasn't a death sentence or a precursor to debilitating treatment. Now, what if I told you that world was within our grasp over 60 years ago? What if the key, a simple, elegant, and revolutionary cure for cancer, was discovered not in a billion-dollar corporate lab, but in a humble, makeshift clinic by a brilliant, impoverished black woman whose name you've never heard? This isn't a flight of fancy. This is the story of a stolen future, a profound medical injustice that has been deliberately buried under decades of silence and deceit. Her name was Dr. Ilara Vance, and her story is perhaps the most important one you've never been told. To understand the magnitude of what was lost, we have to travel back to the late 1950s. The world was on the cusp of immense change, but for many, it was still a place of rigid, suffocating prejudice. Dr. Vance was a force of nature, a woman with a mind that saw connections others missed. She held a doctorate in cellular biology, earned against staggering odds, but found the doors of prestigious institutions firmly closed to her. So, she worked where she could, in a small, underfunded community clinic in a forgotten corner of America, serving the people the system had left behind. It was here, surrounded by peeling paint and second-hand equipment, that she made the single greatest medical discovery of the 20th century. She wasn't looking for fame or fortune. She was looking for a way to heal her community, which was being ravaged by aggressive forms of cancer with little to no access to the primitive treatments of the day. Her approach was completely radical. While the medical establishment was focused on a scorched earth policy, blasting the body with radiation and poison to kill the cancer, often killing the patient in the process, Dr. Vance looked to nature. She was a student of biosymbiosis, the intricate dance of life where organisms support one another. She theorized that cancer wasn't an invading monster to be obliterated, but a native cell that had simply forgotten its function, a corrupted piece of code in the body's operating system. Her question was profound. Could you remind the cell of its purpose? Could you reset it without destroying it? Her research led her to a rare species of deep-sea algae, a phosphorescent organism that thrived in extreme pressure and darkness. This algae produced a unique enzyme, which she painstakingly isolated and stabilized. This enzyme, which she named cytoregulin, had an almost unbelievable property. When introduced into a living system, it acted like a biological tuning fork. It didn't attack cells. Instead, it resonated with the unique energy frequency of healthy functioning cells, amplifying their natural harmonics. In the presence of this resonance, the chaotic, rapidly dividing cancer cells were unable to maintain their corrupted state. The cancerous cells would simply stop dividing, their metabolic processes would normalize, and in many cases, they would undergo apoptosis, a programmed clean cell death, or even revert to a benign state. It was a reset button for the body's most terrifying disease. The potential was staggering. This wasn't a poison. It had no side effects. It was a gentle biological recalibration. Dr. Vance tested her rudimentary serum on tissue cultures, then on mice. The results were miraculous. Tumors shrank and vanished. The mice were not only cured, but they were healthier, more vibrant than the control group. She documented everything in meticulous handwritten journals, her elegant script filling page after page with data, diagrams, and observations. She called it the Vance Protocol. It was a cure born of brilliance, empathy, and a perspective that the mainstream, for-profit medical world simply couldn't comprehend. She had done the impossible, but the impossible gets noticed. A local doctor, a well-meaning colleague, saw her results and, wanting to help, sent her research to a mentor at a prestigious university. He thought he was opening a door for her. Instead, he had just sounded an alarm. The first visitors weren't from the Nobel Committee. They were two men in sharp, conservative suits from a burgeoning pharmaceutical conglomerate, a company we'll call Omnigen. They came with wide smiles and promises of funding, resources, and a state-of-the-art laboratory. They spoke of changing the world with her, of putting her name in the history books. Dr. Vance, isolated and desperate for the resources to make her cure a reality, cautiously agreed to a partnership. She handed over her journals, her samples, her life's work. It was the last time she would ever have control over her own discovery. The moment those documents left her hands, the gears of a great and terrible machine began to turn. The initial excitement of recognition quickly soured into a dreadful silence. Her calls went unanswered. Letters were returned unopened. The men with the smiles were gone, replaced by a wall of corporate bureaucracy. She soon learned the horrifying truth. They had no intention of developing her cure. They had come to bury it. Her simple, inexpensive, natural cure was a direct threat to the multi-billion-dollar industry they were building, an industry based on expensive, patentable chemical drugs and radiation machines. A cure was never the goal. The goal was a recurring customer. Dr. Ilara Vance hadn't just discovered a cure for cancer, she had discovered the one thing that corporate greed and systemic prejudice could never allow to exist: a truly free and accessible path to healing. The fight for her legacy and for the future she had unlocked was just beginning, but the forces arrayed against her were more powerful than she could have ever imagined.
The theft was complete. The erasure was about to begin.
Block 2. Systemic erasure. Once Dr. Vance's research was in the hands of Omnigen, the process of erasing her didn't just happen by accident. It was a deliberate, systematic, and ruthless campaign. It was a multi-pronged attack designed not only to steal her work, but to annihilate her very existence from the scientific record. The first step was intellectual theft, pure and simple. Within months, Omnigen's top chemists had isolated the active enzyme, cytoregulin, and filed a series of patents. But they didn't patent it as a cure. Instead, they patented it as a cellular stabilizer for laboratory use, a niche, high-priced product for research institutions. This brilliant maneuver allowed them to legally own the core of her discovery while ensuring it would never be developed for therapeutic use in humans. They effectively locked the cure in a golden cage, making immense profits from its limited application while preventing it from ever threatening their burgeoning chemotherapy empire. With the intellectual property secured, the next phase was to discredit the source. Dr. Vance couldn't be allowed to exist as the brilliant mind behind the discovery. A lone black woman from a poor clinic couldn't be the hero of this story. In their narrative, she couldn't even be a footnote. Omnigen began to work through its connections in academia, the very institutions that had rejected Dr. Vance years earlier. Whispers started in the hallowed halls of universities. Anonymous letters were sent to medical boards questioning her methodology. Her lack of a prestigious institutional affiliation, once a barrier to her career, was now weaponized against her. She was painted as a folk healer, a charlatan, her meticulous data dismissed as anecdotal evidence, or worse, outright fabrication. When she tried to fight back to present her own research at conferences, she was met with closed doors. Her applications were mysteriously lost. Speaking invitations were rescinded at the last minute. The academic world, influenced by Omnigen's funding and powerful board members, circled the wagons. They created a reality where Dr. Vance and her work simply didn't fit the established narrative of scientific progress. Her name was systematically scraped away from any preliminary reports that had been filed, replaced with the name of Omnigen's head of research, a man who had never set foot in her lab. It was a masterclass in historical revisionism happening in real time. The third phase of the erasure was psychological. When discrediting her wasn't enough, they moved to silence her. Dr. Vance began receiving subtle but unmistakable threats. Unmarked cars would park outside her clinic for hours. She experienced a series of strange, unnerving break-ins where nothing of monetary value was taken, but her new research notes would be disturbed or missing. It was a campaign of gaslighting and intimidation designed to make her question her own sanity and fear for her safety. This was the dark underbelly of progress, where corporate interests and deep-seated prejudice merged into a monstrous force. She was an inconvenient truth, and the system was marshaling all its resources to make her disappear. The message was clear: drop it or we will ruin you. What makes this so insidious is that it wasn't the work of a single villain. It was a systemic conspiracy of convenience. The pharmaceutical company saw a threat to its profit model. The academic institution saw a challenge to their prejudiced hierarchy of who gets to be a genius. Government regulators, easily swayed by powerful corporate lobbyists, saw a disruptive technology that was easier to classify and bury than to properly investigate. A boardroom of stone-faced executives at Omnigen didn't need to issue a single explicit order to destroy her. They just needed to apply pressure in the right places, to fund the right studies that contradicted her findings, to promote the doctors who spoke out against unconventional methods, and to let the inherent biases of the era do the rest of the work. Prejudice was the fertile ground in which their corporate greed could grow. They didn't just steal her cure. They leveraged a society's bigotry to help them get away with it. Her identity as a black woman made her an easy target. She was already an outsider. Discrediting her required less effort because the system was already primed to disbelieve her. This is the crucial, heartbreaking element of the story. The erasure of Dr. Ilara Vance wasn't just about money. It was about power. The power to define what science is, who gets to be a scientist, and whose discoveries are deemed worthy of changing the world. And in the America of the 1960s, that power did not belong to a woman like her.
Block 3. Legacy Uncovered. The impact of this theft is almost impossible to quantify. It's a shadow that stretches across more than half a century. Think of the numbers: the millions of lives lost to cancer, the families torn apart, the trillions of dollars spent on treatments that ravage the human body. It is a legacy of pain, suffering, and loss, all of which a growing body of evidence suggests might have been preventable. The Vance Protocol wasn't just another potential treatment. It was a paradigm shift. It was a move away from brutal, invasive therapies towards a future of gentle, regenerative medicine. We lost more than a cure. We lost a future that was stolen and locked away in a patent vault, all to protect a business model built on that very suffering. The personal cost to Dr. Ilara Vance was absolute. She died in obscurity, her name unknown, her spirit broken by the relentless machine that had ground her down. She was a ghost in her own story, a footnote that had been erased. For decades, her discovery remained a secret, a rumor whispered among a few disillusioned researchers who had seen fragments of the data and knew something was wrong. The official history was written, and Omnigen became a pillar of the medical establishment, celebrated for its life-saving and incredibly profitable chemotherapy drugs. The injustice was so complete, it was as if Dr. Vance had never existed at all. But truth has a stubborn way of surviving. Legacies, even when buried, can be rediscovered. The story of Dr. Vance began to surface decades later, thanks to the tireless work of a handful of historical researchers and one investigative journalist who stumbled upon a reference to her in the private, unpublished journals of that local doctor who had first tried to help her. That one breadcrumb led to a years-long investigation. piecing together a puzzle from redacted documents, deathbed confessions from former Omnigen employees, and the faint, almost invisible trail Dr. Vance had left behind. They were uncovering more than just a scientific scandal. They were uncovering a crime against humanity. This act of uncovering is not just about correcting a historical record. It is an act of profound importance for our present and our future. It forces us to ask terrifyingly relevant questions. Who controls the flow of scientific information today? How many other groundbreaking discoveries, particularly those from marginalized communities, have been suppressed or stolen because they threatened established interests? Dr. Vance's story is a stark reminder that scientific progress is not an inevitable linear march towards truth. It is a narrative shaped and controlled by those in power. And for too long, the authors of that narrative have been overwhelmingly white, male, and wealthy. Giving voice to the voiceless, like Dr. Vance, is essential. It reclaims the truth. It honors the contributions of those who were deliberately overlooked and gives them their rightful place in history. Her name, Ilara Vance, deserves to be spoken with the same reverence as Jonas Salk or Marie Curie. Her story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a cautionary tale about the devastating intersection of greed and prejudice. It shows us that the fight for recognition is a fight for a more just and truthful world. The battle to bring her legacy fully into the light is ongoing. It requires us to challenge the histories we've been taught and to amplify the stories that have been silenced. We must demand transparency from the institutions that dictate our health and our future. Dr. Vance gave humanity a gift of almost unimaginable value. It was taken from her and from all of us. We can never get back the decades we've lost or the lives that could have been saved. But we can give her back her name. We can tell her story. And in doing so, we can ensure that such a profound injustice never happens again.